Hi, my name is Brian Goldfarb. I'm a product manager on the Web Platform and Tools team, responsible for Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition and the web features inside of Visual Studio 2005. I also work on ASP.NET, our web platform technology. So today I'm here to talk about Visual Studio and Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition in relation to our web tools. When you look at our past tools with Visual Studio.NET 2003, we heard a lot of feedback from customers about the good things and also the bad things. And we've worked really hard over the last couple of years to incorporate a lot of that feedback into a new web tool and into Visual Studio to create a high-quality web development experience from both the hobbyist all the way to the enterprise. What we've heard through customer feedback is that Visual Studio.NET 2003 often lack some of the more designer-focused features. There was some trouble when switching back and forth between design view and source view. So today we're going to take a look at Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition and see how the tool has been improved to increase the quality of the web development experience. So let's go ahead and take a look at a demo.
Here we are inside of Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition. You'll notice that it's based on the Visual Studio IDE, but it's been simplified and streamlined for the web developer. Now to get started, we're going to want to build our first new web project. So I'll choose File, New Website. You'll notice I can choose different project types, Visual Basic, Visual C#, or Visual J#, and I'm going to go ahead and build an empty website. Now I'm going to browse. Before, in Visual Studio.NET 2003, I was required to have access to IIS and use front page server extensions. That dependency is gone. I can now build something directly on the file system because our new project model is directory-based. I can also iterate over the local IIS metabase and create new vroutes. I can use FTP to connect to a remote server to build my site, or I can continue to use front page server extensions. Today we're going to go ahead and use the local file system. We'll call the folder MSDN TV. We'll go ahead and create the folder and build our empty website. Now in the past, when this happened, Visual Studio would have created a bunch of files in that folder. But with Visual Studio 2005, Visual Developer 2005 Express Edition, we're going with the mantra that no matter what you do, the tool's never going to do something without your knowledge. So if we go ahead and jump to the MSDN TV folder, we'll notice that it's completely empty. There's no files there, there's no project files there, there's no front page server extension _VTI files. It's completely blank. You haven't done anything, there shouldn't be anything there. And we'll continue to see that mantra throughout the tool. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and add a new item. And let's build our first web form called default.aspx. And we'll build that in Visual Basic. And we'll use code behind. You'll probably recognize a lot of these templates from before, a lot of new features as well. Now it's going to go ahead and build out the template. And you're going to notice something right away. That it's a very, very simplified template. There's no more meta tag that says built by Visual Studio. There's no other extraneous information. Actually, what you're looking at here is the simplest possible XHTML 1.1 strict template. This is as little as you can have to be completely compliant with XHTML 1.1. Our new tool is 100% XHTML 1.1 strict compliant. So all of the code you write with XHTML with CSS is supported by the tool. So let's go ahead and write a little bit of code. Now, one of the big problems that we had with Visual Studio.NET 2003, and a very common source of customer complaint, was that when I flipped from source view to design view and back to source view, it reformatted my code. So let's take a look at how we're dealing with that now. So let's go ahead and write some code. I'm going to put together a table here and do some funky formatting that's probably not typical to how you would format your tables by keeping these TDs not indented there. And now I'm going to drag a button in from the toolbar. Now, if you're not familiar, in Visual Studio.NET 2003, you couldn't do that. You couldn't actually drag a button from the toolbox onto source view. In Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition, you can. So here we are. Now let's go ahead and format the properties of this button a little bit differently than you might expect. just so I can see them easier at this large font size. And there we go. Now everyone hold your breath. I'm going to flip to design view. And there's our button. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make some changes in design view. Let's go ahead and insert some white space above and below, and we'll write some text here. This is some text. And we'll write some text down here. This is some text. And here we go. I'm going to flip back to source view. And lo and behold, you'll notice that all of the indenting and formatting that I did before we switched to design view is maintained. The only thing that's changed is it's added in the BRs and the text that I added in design view. So now we have 100% source preservation. So no matter when you go from design view to source view back and forth, everything is going to be preserved just how you like it. Now let's go ahead and change some properties. So I'll click on the button, and I can scroll down here to the text property and change it to push me. And it's going to change just the text property in our button. If I go back to design view, click on the button and change the same property here to click me, jump back to source view. Once again, all of our sources preserved, and it only changes the property that I'm interested in. So let's go ahead and run this application, take a look and see what's going on. So I'm going to hit Control F5. And now I don't have IIS. I'm running on the local file system. And what you're going to see here is it pops up the built-in Visual Developer web server. You don't need IIS to run or debug your applications anymore. A web server now ships directly in the box. And here's our application. So let's jump back in here and let's write a little bit of code. So let's double-click on the button and jump to code behind. Now you might notice a difference here from ASP.NET 1.1 and Visual Studio.NET 2003, that at the top of this code behind file, there's no hidden designer section with a bunch of crud. We don't need to do that anymore. We're using a new code behind model using partial classes that gives us a very clean code behind scenario. So let's go ahead and write a little bit of code that says button1.text equals I was clicked. We can save this, and we can save this page here, jump back to the browser, click the button, and you'll notice we're getting an iterative design process. I didn't have to recompile the site. I didn't have to rebuild anything. All I did was make a change, jump back to the browser, hit refresh. We now have the save and refresh model for development, which tends to resonate more with the way web developers are doing workflow. So let's go back to source view, take a look at a couple of other new tools features that are going on. First of all, we now have IntelliSense everywhere. And when I mean everywhere, I mean everywhere. We get IntelliSense in page directives. We get IntelliSense with HTML. We get IntelliSense in a script block. Anywhere you could write code, even in the web.config file, we're going to provide IntelliSense. But that IntelliSense is smart. So if I go ahead and hit space in the body, you'll notice I have about 14,000 different things here. That's because we're validating against Internet Explorer 6.0. But if I change my validation schema, which is fully pluggable, to something more strict or more old, like a legacy browser like IE3, now when I go ahead and bring up IntelliSense for that body tag, it's going to filter it automatically and only show the 14 things that work instead of the thousands and thousands of options. So what IntelliSense provides is only what works with the browser or technology that you're validating against. If I jump back to IE6 here, and let's go ahead and actually check out this IntelliSense, we can say, style equals, and we're going to get IntelliSense in real time on CSS styles. So we can go ahead and set the background color to aqua, jump back to design view, and there we go. We're using inline CSS styles and getting IntelliSense on the fly. Let's go back to source view here and take a look at a few more things. So if you're at all like me, you're very particular about the way you want your code to look. You want it indented one way. You want it to be a specific, layout and look and feel for the way your code is. Here I did some pretty funky stuff. That's not the way you may think is the way you want to lay out your code. And if you ask your friend, their way is the right way. and so is your way, and that way is different. So we've added a lot of functionality into the tool to give you granular control about the way your code looks. So let's imagine a scenario. Your friend emails you a file, which I have right here, called formatting.aspx. I'm just going to drag and drop it into my project and open it up. And you look at this code and you're like, God, how did he ever write code? It's just the ugliest thing you've ever seen. You want to make it look the way you want your code to look. So what I can do is right-click and choose Formatting and Validation. And here I have a whole set of detailed validation and formatting options, like what a server tag should look like from casing perspective, what a client tag should look like, whether to insert attribute quotes. I can also drill into tag-specific options, and I can set default settings for both server tags and client tags, whether you want it to have a closing tag, where the carriage returns go. I can then set all of those individual characteristics for every single client HTML tag, and I can also set them for individual ASP.NET controls. Now I've already added one for ASP hyperlink. I want it to use a self-closing tag. I want it to have line breaks both before and after. If I change this, you'll see we get a real-time preview of what it would look like. Let's go ahead and move it back. And I don't want to indent the contents. Click OK. Now I can select everything and choose Format. And very, very, very quickly, I get a nice, properly formatted, the way I want it to look, HTML file. But one of the things I said was I wanted line breaks before and after these hyperlink tags. And when I scroll to the end, we'll notice that the BR is still on the same line. That's because our formatting is pretty intelligent. We do a lot of work on the background to do what's called white space preservation, to understand where white space is inside of your document. Had Visual Developer 2005 Express Edition moved that BR down, it would have changed the way that your code and your HTML markup rendered in the browser. And that's unacceptable. If you format it, it should change the way the code looks, but the rendering should always be the same. So if I were to introduce a space here, which would already have changed the way things render in the browser, and then reformat that section, we'll get the true formatting options so that it moves that BR down. So when you format code, you can do it safely and understand that no matter what you do to change the code, it's not going to change the way things look. So you can be very comfortable doing that. Beyond being able to format your code, we've done a little bit of work on the fit and finish side. So let's flip back to this default.aspx page. Now one thing you might notice when I click on this TR tag is it gets highlighted. This is a new feature called tag highlighting. And if we scroll down, we'll see that it's highlighting the closed TR tag. So now you can very easily see related tags in a complex HTML structure. So I know that this TD open tag is related to this TD close tag. Another great thing that we've done is let's go ahead and click on this ASP button and then jump back to design view. You'll notice the cursor is already selecting the button. If I go ahead and highlight some text in design view and flip to source view, that same text is going to be highlighted. I can also do the same thing back into design view. So it's a great new continuity between the design view and the source view that didn't exist before. Another popular new feature is our tag navigator down here at the bottom. And what that does is show you where inside your HTML hierarchy the actual tag that you're looking at is. So this BR tag sits inside a TD tag, inside the TR, all the way down. And you can navigate the document and select things based on that hierarchy. So if I click this TR link, it'll select the TR and everything inside of it. I can also choose the drop down and just select the tag's content, hit delete, and it saves the tag but deletes everything in between. So it gives you a very easy way to navigate through complex HTML structures. We've done a lot of other great things inside the tool that I encourage you to explore yourself. I hope this has given you a good look at some of the great improvements in Visual Developer 2005 Express Edition and inside the entire Visual Studio 2005 stack, because all of these features also work in all of the professional and higher level products.
So now that we've seen a lot of the improvements that we've made in Visual Web Developer 2005 Express Edition, I encourage you all to go out and download the latest beta, which is available for free right now, and check out all the great improvements in the tool and the platform in ASP.NET 2.0 and start building some fun and exciting web applications.